I was hiding in the back row of a room filled with high-ranking military officers and wealthy relatives, convinced I was just an irrelevant outsider. That illusion shattered the moment the lawyer pointed directly at my face in front of everyone. He asked if I knew who my biological parents were. That single question silenced the room, exposed a secret buried for more than 30 years, and instantly transformed me from a nameless medic into the most controversial heir in America. My name is Natalia Chavez. I am 32 years old, and for every single one of those years, I have been an outsider. Today was supposed to be no different. I sat in the last row of a conference room that cost more than my apartment building. The law offices of Barton, Cole, and Avery were on the top floor of the tallest glass building in Ridgeport, Colorado, a monument to old money and quiet, ruthless power. The air smelled of walnut polish, leather, and a faint, floral perfume I associated with the wealthy patients I sometimes treated. I was here in my work uniform, crisp, navy blue scrubs, the logo of the Northbridge Veterans Medical Center embroidered over my heart. My hair was pulled back in the same tight, unforgiving bun I'd worn for 6 years in the Army. It was practical. It was armor. And in this room, it was a target. I felt the weight of their eyes when I first walked in. Not direct stares, but the quick, dismissive glances that slide off you once they've assessed your worth and found it lacking. This was the Reddick family. They were gathered for the reading of the will of Major General Mason Reddick, a 4-star legend I had cared for in his final, unglamorous months. The room itself was a shrine to him. The walls were a gallery of his life. General Reddick shaking hands with at least 3 different presidents. General Reddick in full-dress uniform, chest glittering with medals I could actually name. General Reddick in desert camouflage, visiting troops. His face a mask of determined leadership. He was a giant, and these were the people who shared his blood. They did not look like him. In the front row, holding court, was Trent Reddick, his nephew. I recognized him from the hospital, where he'd show up for 10-minute visits, smelling of expensive cologne and impatience. He was a man expanding rapidly against the confines of a suit that must have cost a few $1,000s. His face was perpetually flushed, his stomach preceding him. He was whispering to a woman beside him, her face pulled tight from surgery, her jewelry flashing with cold. Hard light. They were not mourning, they were calculating. I'd overheard them in the elevator on the way up. "Just get this over with," a blonde cousin muttered, stabbing at her phone. "I have a 2:30 tea time." "I just want to know what Trent's managed to siphon off before today," another replied. A man I didn't know glanced back at me, still standing by the elevator bank, and then leaned in. "They even invited the help," he whispered, not quietly enough. "Look, one of the nurses is here." Medic, not nurse. I didn't bother to correct the air. I just found the most remote chair possible, near the door, under the hum of the air conditioning. I was here because a formal, embossed summons had arrived at my cramped apartment. I assumed it was a mistake, until I called the law firm and a polite, firm paralegal confirmed, "The general specified your presence, Ms. Chavez." So I came, out of respect, out of duty. That's what you do for a man like the general, even if his family made my skin crawl. At the head of the massive, polished walnut table sat the lawyer, Elliot Kane. He was the opposite of the Reddick heirs. He was thin, precise, and wore a simple, dark wool suit. He looked like a man who had never spilled anything in his life. He cleared his throat, and the room's ambient chatter died instantly, replaced by the rustle of expensive fabrics as people settled in. Leaning forward, the hunt was on. "We are gathered," Mr. Kane began, his voice dry and neutral, "to execute the final will and testament of Major General Mason Reddick, dated March 4th of this year." A few people shifted. Trent's flush deepened. A March date. Recent. That must have sparked 1,000 silent panics. Mr. Kane began to read. His voice was a monotone drone, listing bequests, a significant sum to the Wounded Warrior Project, another to a local animal shelter, a generous pension for his longtime housekeeper, Gloria, who I'd come to respect deeply during my time at the estate. I smiled for her. She deserved it. He read through a list of minor personal effects. To my nephew, Trent Reddick, I leave my collection of antique humidors, in the hope he might one day appreciate the value of patience and preservation. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from smirking, a clear, cold jab from beyond the grave. Trent did not appreciate it. He looked like his collar was trying to strangle him. Mr. Kane continued, flipping a page. A sum is to be set aside for the following individuals, in gratitude for their service and care during my final illness. He read a few names, the oncologist, a private physical therapist, and then, to Natalia Chavez, $10,000. My head snapped up. 10,000. It was more money than I had in my savings account. The cousins turned, their eyes sweeping over me. This time, the stare lingered. It was not friendly. It was the look of wolves spotting a lamb that had just been given a piece of their kill. I shrank back, my face burning. I wanted to disappear. I was grateful, shocked, and deeply, profoundly uncomfortable. I assumed that was it for me. I was just a line item, a thank you note with a check attached. I started to mentally plan my exit, how to get to the door without drawing more attention. Mr. Kane paused. He took a sip of water. The sound of his swallow was loud in the silence. He set the glass down with a deliberate, soft click. He adjusted his papers, pulling a separate, thinner folder from his briefcase. An addendum. The air in the room changed. The casual entitlement vanished, replaced by a sharp, predatory focus. This was it. This was the meat. And now, Mr. Kane said, and his voice was different. The dry monotone was gone, replaced by something heavier, something almost theatrical, as if he was bracing himself. We come to the final addendum. This section pertains to the disposition of the primary estate, the Reddick Honor Fund, and his only granddaughter. A collective gasp, a stunned, absolute silence. Granddaughter. The general had a son who died young. Yes, but no one ever spoke of a child. I watched Trent's face go from flushed red to a pale, mottled white. He looked genuinely, completely shocked. The woman with the tight face let out a small, strangled noise. That's not possible. Mason never. Mr. Kane held up a single, pale hand. Please, the general was very specific. He did not look at the family. He did not look at his papers. He looked up, his eyes scanning the room, past the expensive suits and the angry, confused faces. His gaze traveled all the way to the back row, all the way to the door, all the way to me. He locked eyes with me. My heart, which had been beating a steady, medic's rhythm, gave a painful, violent lurch. Sergeant Chavez, he said. He used my old rank. The sound of it, in this room, felt like a gunshot. Every head, every single person, turned. The weight of 20 pairs of hostile eyes hit me like a physical blow. I felt naked. I felt accused. Elliot Kane held my gaze. His was unblinking. Sergeant Chavez, do you know who your biological parents are? The question hung in the air. Absurd, indecent, impossible. It made no sense. What did my parents have to do with anything? Why was he asking me this? Why was everyone staring? My body went cold, then hot. The hum of the air conditioner suddenly roared in my ears, drowning out all other sound. My pulse was a frantic drum against my ribs. My hands, hidden behind my back, clenched so hard my fingernails dug into my palms. Do you know who your biological parents are? The question was a key. Unlocking a door inside me I kept permanently bolted, a door to a lifetime of blank spaces. The father line on my birth certificate, empty, the file in the orphanage I'd tracked down, which only listed my mother's name and unknown for everything else. My mother. All my questions, all my childhood pleas of who was he, where did I come from, met with the same sad, terrified shake of her head. It's just us, Nati, she would whisper, her voice trembling. It's safer this way, just us. She died taking that secret with her, and here, in this room of vipers, a man in a wool suit was demanding I bleed it out for their entertainment. What? The word came from one of the cousins, a sharp, nasal burst. What does that have to do with anything? Another voice, a man's, cut through. She's just a medic. For God's sake. Kane, what is this circus? Why are you dragging her into family business? The insult was clear. Her, she, a medic, not a person, not one of them. I tried to answer. I opened my mouth, but my throat had closed. It felt like I'd been intubated. I was trained for this, for high-stress situations. I was trained to run triage under fire. I was trained to hold my ground. But this was a different kind of warfare, one of whispers and bloodlines, and I was completely unarmed. The silence stretched. It became painful. I could feel their judgment pressing down, suffocating me. They were all thinking the same thing. I was a fraud, an imposter. Well, Trent Reddick sneered. He had recovered from his shock, and it had curdled into pure, ugly contempt. He smirked, a wet, unpleasant expression. Then what is she doing here? I finally found my voice. It came out as a ragged whisper, a complete betrayal of the calm I was trying to project. I could only look at Mr. Kane. My voice cracked. I swallowed, the sound echoing in my own ears. I don't really know. A wave of sound broke the tension. Hissing whispers, a sharp, disbelieving laugh from Trent. A woman muttered, "This is pathetic." I felt like a specimen pinned to a board. That is quite enough. Mr. Kane's voice cracked like a whip. The room fell silent again, startled by his sudden command. He looked around the room, his gaze landing on each of the Reddick heirs, one by one. He was no longer a neutral arbiter. He was an executioner. Mrs. Albright, Mr. Reddick, you will all remain seated, and you will be silent. The general was exceptionally clear on this point. He specified Sergeant Chavez's presence for this exact portion of the reading. If any of you cannot conduct yourselves with the basic decency he requested, you may leave now and forfeit any and all claims detailed in the preceding document. No one moved. The threat of losing money was the one thing that could tame them. He turned his gaze back to me. It was softer now, but still insistent. He had done this for a reason. He had exposed me for a reason. I looked at the hostile faces staring at me, their expressions a mix of confusion, disgust, and raw greed. I looked at the lawyer, waiting. I looked at the portraits of the general on the wall, his stern, knowing eyes seeming to follow me. I had walked in here as Natalia Chavez, medic, a nobody, a ghost. I had come to pay my respects and ended up on trial. I realized, with a sudden, sinking dread that settled deep in my bones, that this was not a will reading, it was in detonation, and I was standing at ground zero. This was the day my entire life, the past I never knew and the future I thought I had, was about to be torn open right in front of them. Mr. Kane did not acknowledge my answer. He did not wait for another outburst. He simply cleared his throat, a sharp, formal sound that reset the room. He looked down at the addendum in his hands. As I was stating, he continued, his voice now laced with a cold, hard finality. The general's wishes concern his granddaughter. He went on reading. His words became a meaningless drone. Clauses, subclauses, bequeathments, and legal stipulations dissolved into white noise. The room, the heavy walnut table, the angry, entitled faces, all of it began to fade, blurring at the edges. His question had done its job. It was not a question, it was a detonation, and the shockwave it triggered in my chest sent me tumbling backward, away from this suffocating, expensive silence, and back to the only life I had ever really known. I was no longer in a high-rise law firm in Ridgeport. I was in a cramped, two-bedroom apartment over a failing barbershop. The air smelled of stale beer from the alley, and the chemical tang of cheap hair dye from the business below. The linoleum in the kitchen was cracked, and the radiator in my room clanged like a trapped man signaling for help. This was my home. This was my world. defined by the constant, grinding exhaustion of my mother, Diane Langley. She was a ghost held together by sheer will. She worked double shifts as a waitress at the 24-hour diner off the highway, then cleaned office buildings downtown before the sun came up. I measured my days by the sounds of her coming and going, the jingle of her keys in the pre-dawn dark, the whisper of her crepe-soled shoes on the floorboards as she checked on me, believing I was asleep. I remember the smell of her. It was not perfume. It was the acrid scent of industrial bleach, the ammonia from cleaning chemicals, and the faint, greasy odor of the diner's fryers that clung to her hair. She would come home with her feet swollen, her face pale, and force a smile that looked like it physically hurt her. "It's just us two, Nati," she would whisper, her hands, rough as sandpaper, brushing the hair from my face. "Just you and me. That's enough. That's all we need." She said it so often it became a prayer, a mantra, a shield she was holding up against a world that was always, always trying to get in. I was 10 years old when I found the crack in that shield. I was looking for drawing paper, digging in the back of her closet, in the cheap metal filing cabinet where she kept what she called important papers. It was mostly utility bills, our lease, and my immunization records. My hand brushed against a manila folder, tucked underneath a stack of old pay stubs. Inside was a single, flimsy piece of paper, a photocopy of a birth certificate. The name at the top was not mine. It read, Hannah Cole, but the birth date was my birth date. The hospital was in a town I'd never heard of. The mother's name was Diane, and the line for the father was a stark, empty void. "What are you doing?" Her voice was sharp. I had never heard her use that tone with me. She was home early from her cleaning job, a rare occurrence. I turned, holding the paper. Her face went white, not pale, a bloodless, terrifying white. She lunged, not like a mother, but like a cornered animal, and snatched the paper from my hand. Her fingers were trembling so hard the paper rattled. "Nati, no, you don't go in here. This is private." "Who is Hannah Cole?" I asked, my voice small. "It's nothing," she snapped, and the panic in her voice scared me more than the anger. "It's old paperwork. It's not important." She shoved the paper back into the folder, slammed the drawer shut, and turned the tiny key. It was the only thing in our apartment that she ever locked. She sank onto the edge of her bed, her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking. "Your name is Natalia. Natalia Chavez. That's who you are. That's enough." It was not enough. It was the beginning of the questions, the beginning of the lies, the beginning of the suffocating feeling that I was a puzzle with half the pieces deliberately kept in the box. It got worse. A few years later, the envelopes started arriving. They were thick, heavy, expensive. Cream-colored cardstock, with a return address from a law firm I'd never heard of. They came like clockwork, every 6 months. My mom would see them in the stack of mail, and her whole body would seize up. She would not open them. She would just stand over the trash can in our tiny kitchen, ripping them into smaller and smaller pieces, her breath held tight in her chest. "Mom, what is that?" "Is it money?" I asked once, a teenager desperate for any kind of relief from our life. "It's poison," she said, her voice flat and dead. "It's them, trying to find us." "Find us who?" "It doesn't matter. They can't. We're safe here." But she never looked safe. She looked hunted. I grew up with the unspoken, suffocating knowledge that we were running from something, that I was the reason we were running. By 18, I could not take the secrets anymore. I needed out. I needed answers. I enlisted in the army. The GI Bill was the excuse I gave her. The scholarship, the steady paycheck, the chance to be a medic, but the real reason, the one I kept buried, was that I thought I could use the military to find myself, a system that big, a database that deep surely. I could find something about a father, something about Hannah Cole, something about the people my mother was so terrified of. It was another dead end. My background check came back faster than anyone's. It was pristine, too pristine. My file was a void. No father listed, no extended family, just my mother's name, and the word unknown stamped on every other line that mattered. I was a ghost in the system. My mother died while I was on my first deployment in Afghanistan. Heart failure. The doctors called it. I called it what it was. She was worked to death, worn out by a life of fear, secrets, and scrubbing other people's toilets for 30 years. I flew home on emergency leave, buried her in a cheap casket, and then I tore that apartment apart. I went straight for the filing cabinet. It was unlocked, and it was empty. The folder was gone. The letters were gone. All the medical records from her pregnancy, any scrap of a clue. All of it had been systematically erased. The only thing I ever found was a single, old pay stub tucked inside a cookbook. It was from a temp agency. The client listed was Falcon Ridge Air Force Base, a place she had let slip once, in a moment of exhaustion, that she'd worked at before I was born. When I had pressed her about it, she'd gone pale and denied it, saying I must have misheard. Another lie, another dead end. Dragging an orphan into this, the whisper jolted me back to the present. It was Trent Reddick. He was leaning toward the surgically tight woman beside him, his voice a low, carrying sneer. He must have been completely senile. That's the only explanation, dragging a damn orphan into family business. Orphan. The word hit me like a physical slap. It was a word I had spent my entire life fighting. I was not an orphan. I had a mother. I had a life. But he used it to define me, to erase me, in this room, to these people. That is all I was, an unknown, a blank space, a question mark. And as I looked at the hostile, greedy faces of the Reddick family, a new, cold dread washed over me. All those blank spaces in my life, the unknowns on my file, the missing papers, the ripped-up envelopes, my mother's terror. It suddenly felt less like a series of tragedies and more like a strategy, a plan, as if someone with power, had been deliberately curating my ignorance. Mr. Kane was flipping the last page of the addendum. The room was vibrating with tension, everyone waiting for the final financial blow. He read a few more lines, something about trusts and tax liabilities, and then he closed the folder with a quiet, definitive thud. "This concludes the reading," he said. The sound of chairs scraping on the thick carpet was immediate. Trent was on his feet, his face a blotchy, purple mask. "This is a farce. Kane, you know it. We'll be fighting this. That addendum is a joke." He wasn't in his right mind. "Your objections are noted. Mr. Reddick," Kane said, his voice utterly flat. He began packing his briefcase. A man done with his day's work. The family began to storm out, a wave of angry, expensive wool and bitter perfume, muttering about lawsuits and incompetence. I stood up. My legs were shaking. I just wanted to leave. I wanted to run. I wanted to go back to my tiny, safe apartment, lock the door, and pretend this day, this room, this question had never happened. I was at the door when his voice cut through the noise. "Sergeant Chavez, a moment." I froze. The few family members still lingering turned to look at me, their eyes filled with active hatred. I turned back. Elliot Kane was standing by the table, waiting, his briefcase in hand. "I'd appreciate it if you stayed," he said, loud enough for them to hear. "The general left specific instructions for me to speak with you privately. There are documents that I must explain to you." Documents. The word hung in the air. For the first time in my 32 years, someone was telling me, confirming, that documents about me actually existed, that I was not just a collection of unknowns and locked drawers. Trent, who was halfway out the door, stopped. He looked at Kane, then at me. His eyes narrowed into slits of pure, cold calculation. He did not say a word. He just gave a sharp, angry huff and disappeared into the hallway, his entourage of vipers following him. I was alone in the room with the lawyer. My first instinct, my mother's instinct, was to run. "I'm sorry. Mr. Kane, I have to get back to the hospital. My shift starts soon. Whatever it is, you can mail it to me." I did not want this. This felt dirty. This was a family tearing itself apart over money, and I was somehow being used as a weapon. I was a medic. I helped people. I did not want to be part of this. I took a step toward the door, but then, the other part of me kicked in. The part that had been forged in the dust of Afghanistan. The medic in me was screaming, "Run," but the sergeant, the part of me that had held pressure on bleeding wounds and refused to panic, whispered something else. "If you leave now, you will never know." I stopped. My hand was on the doorknob. I could feel the cold, heavy brass against my damp palm. If I walked out, I would go back to my apartment. I would go back to my job, and for the rest of my life, I would be that 10-year-old girl, staring at a locked file cabinet. I would be that 18-year-old recruit, staring at the word unknown. I would be running, just like my mother. I turned around. I let go of the doorknob. "What documents?" I asked. Elliot Kane gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. He motioned to a chair at the table. I did not know it then, but sitting down was the first real choice I had ever made. I looked around the empty, silent room, at the portraits of the general staring down at me. This was the day. This was the day my life, the one I had, and the one that had been stolen from me, would finally, violently, collide. I had no idea which one would be left standing. The last of the Reddick clan stormed out, leaving a wake of expensive perfume and threats of litigation hanging in the heavy air. The door clicked shut, cutting off the noise of the outer office, but the silence that followed felt even louder. "This way, Sergeant," Elliot Kane said. He did not wait for a response. He turned and walked toward a side door I hadn't noticed before, a panel of frosted glass that looked more like a wall than an entrance. I followed him. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through deep water. The room we entered was smaller, intimate, and suffocatingly serious. It was an interrogation room disguised as a private library. The walls were lined with black and white photographs of severe-looking men, the founding partners of Barton, Cole, and Avery. I assumed they stared down with the same judgmental weight as the family outside. In the center was a small, round table with 2 chairs. No windows, no escape. "Sit," he said. It wasn't an order, but it wasn't really a request either. I sat. Mr. Kane sat opposite me. He placed his leather briefcase on the table and clicked the latches open. The sound was sharp, like the racking of a slide on a pistol. He pulled out a thin beige file folder. He placed it directly in front of me, on the cover. In typed, bureaucratic font was my name, Natalia Chavez. "Open it," he said. My hand trembled as I reached out. I flipped the cover. There was a single photograph clipped to the top of the first page. It was grainy, black and white, clearly a copy of a copy. It showed a newborn baby, red-faced and squalling, wrapped in a hospital blanket. Typed underneath the photo was a name and a date. Hannah Cole, October 14th, 1992. My birthday. I stared at the name, Hannah Cole. I had seen that name once before, 22 years ago, on a stolen piece of paper my mother had snatched away in a panic. Seeing it here, in this cold, sterile room, felt like a punch to the gut. "The general was a meticulous man," Mr. Kane said, his voice low and steady. "When he wanted to find something, he found it. About 5 years ago, he began a private investigation. He was looking for a child born in 1992 to a woman named Lena Reddick Cole." I looked up, confused. "Lena, I don't know, Alina." "No," Kane said. "You wouldn't. But you knew the woman who raised you, Diane Langley." He slid a second document across the table. It was a personnel file. Diane Langley. Civilian contractor, nursing assistant, Falcon Ridge Air Force Base, terminated November 1992. "Your mother worked at Falcon Ridge," Kane explained. "General Reddick was the base commander at the time. It was a massive facility, thousands of personnel. He didn't know her personally then, but years later, when he started tracking the movements of his niece, Lena, the trail led back to that base, and to Diane." "Why?" I asked. My voice sounded thin in the small room. Why was he looking for me? He wasn't looking for you at first, Kane corrected gently. He was looking for his niece's child. Lena disappeared from the family estate 32 years ago. She was pregnant. The situation was volatile. She ran. She ended up at Falcon Ridge, using an alias, working under the table. She befriended a young nursing assistant named Diane. He tapped the photo of the baby. There was an incident at the base housing. A domestic dispute. Police were called, but no charges filed. 2 days later, both women vanished. The general spent decades trying to find out what happened to Lena. He only found the end of the trail 2 years ago. Lena died in a car accident in Nevada in 1993, but there was no record of a child with her. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. My mother, Diane, she never mentioned Alina. Diane Langley raised you, Kane said. She changed your name. She moved you constantly. She lived off the books. She was hiding. The general's investigators finally connected Diane Langley to Natalia Chavez when you enlisted. Your fingerprints. They matched the partials from a drawing found in Lena's abandoned car, a child's drawing. This is circumstantial, I said, falling back on logic, on the need for hard proof. This is just stories. You can't prove I'm this Hannah. Kane didn't blink. He reached into his briefcase again and pulled out a sealed white envelope. He placed it on top of the baby picture. Do you remember last October? He asked. The general had a severe gastric bleed. It was touch and go. You were the lead medic on the transport team. You stayed with him in the ICU until the family arrived. I remember, I said. He needed a transfusion. The blood bank was running slow. And you volunteered, Kane said. You are O-negative, universal donor. You gave a direct transfusion. It saved his life that night. I nodded slowly. It's standard protocol in emergencies. It is, Kane agreed. But the general, he was suspicious by then. He had suspected who you were from the moment he saw your name on his chart at the VA hospital. He kept a sample of the bloodline. He had it tested. He tapped the white envelope. This is a DNA comparison between Major General Mason Reddick and Natalia Chavez. It confirms a second-degree relationship. Grandfather and granddaughter. The probability of relation is 99.9%. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table. Grandfather. The old man I had changed bandages for. The man whose hand I had held while he slept because his family never came to visit. He was my grandfather. He knew, I whispered. He knew the whole time I was taking care of him. He suspected, Kane said. He confirmed it after the blood test, but he didn't say anything because he was afraid. He was afraid of exactly what happened in that boardroom 10 minutes ago. He knew his family. He knew what they would do to you. So why do this now? I asked, anger flaring up through the shock. Why drag me into this now, when he's dead and can't protect me? Because he wanted to give you a choice, Kane said. He reached into the briefcase one last time. He pulled out a small, heavy plastic bag. Inside was a single key. It was old-fashioned, made of dull steel with no markings. He wanted to tell you himself, Kane said, his voice softening for the first time. But by the time the results came back, he was too weak. He couldn't speak clearly. He wrote me a note. He said, "Give her the key. Let her decide." Decide what? Whether you want the truth, Kane said. This key opens a wall safe in his private study at the Reddick estate. He told me that everything you need to know about Lena, about Diane, about why you were taken and hidden is in that safe. I looked at the key. It looked like a weapon, a small, jagged piece of metal that could cut me open. And the family? I asked. Trent and the others. They don't know about the safe, Kane said. But they know about the money, and that is where things become complicated. He leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table. The general amended his will 6 months ago, right after he met you at the hospital. The bequests I read earlier, the charity donations, those were the decoys. The bulk of the Reddick estate, the land, the investments, the control of the honor fund is not going to Trent. It is not going to the cousins. I felt the blood drain from my face. Where is it going? It is held in a trust, Kane said. Pending the identification of his direct heir, if you are proven to be Hannah Cole and this DNA test says you are, then you are the sole beneficiary of the Reddick fortune. We are talking about an estate valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't want it, I said instantly. The words flew out of my mouth before I could think. I don't want their money. I don't want anything to do with them. They won't care what you want, Kane said grimly. You are a threat. As long as you exist, Trent loses everything. They will come for you. Natalia, they will try to destroy your reputation. They will try to prove you are a fraud. They will dig up every mistake you have ever made. They will not let you just walk away. I stared at him. You're telling me I'm in danger. I am telling you that you have walked into a war zone without a helmet, Kane said. If you walk out that door and never come back, they will still hunt you. They have to secure the money. They have to prove you are not the heir. They have to invalidate your existence. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I thought of my mother, the way she shredded mail, the way she flinched when the phone rang. She had lived her whole life running from these people. She had died hiding from them, and now they had found me. Why are you helping me? I asked, looking at the lawyer. You work for them. You're the family attorney. I was Mason's attorney, Kane corrected, his eyes hard. I served with him in the Gulf. I respected him. I do not respect Trent. And frankly, I am tired of watching vultures pick at the bones of good men. He pushed the plastic bag toward me. If you take this key, you are agreeing to fight. You are agreeing to go to the house, open that safe, and find out who you really are. If you leave it, I will destroy the DNA results. I will tell the court the search for the heir was inconclusive. You can go back to being Natalia Chavez, medic, but Trent will win, and whatever your mother was hiding from whatever reason she had for running will stay buried. I looked at the key. I thought of the fear in my mother's eyes. I thought of the unknown on my birth certificate. I thought of Trent Reddick calling me an orphan, dismissing my entire existence as a clerical error. If I walked away, I was letting them win. I was letting them erase me, just like they erased Lena, just like they erased my mother. My hand moved on its own. I reached out and placed my palm over the plastic bag. The metal of the key was cold through the plastic. It felt solid, real. I'm not running, I said. My voice was steady this time. My mother ran for 30 years. I'm done. I closed my fingers around the key. Kane watched me, and for a second, I saw a flicker of approval in his eyes. He nodded. Good, he said. Then we need to move fast. The family is regrouping. Trent will be filing injunctions by the morning. We need to get you into that house before they lock it down. How? I asked. I am the executor of the estate, Kane said. I have control of the property for another 48 hours. I will arrange for you to go there tomorrow morning, ostensibly for an inventory check, but you will go to the study. You will open the safe. He stood up. I stood up with him. I clutched the key in my hand like a grenade. One more thing. Natalia, Kane said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He looked at the door, as if checking for eavesdroppers. Trust no one. Not the staff. Not your friends. Certainly not anyone with the last name Reddick. Until we have what is in that safe, you are the most vulnerable person in this state. Keep your head down. Keep your mouth shut. I understand, I said. Be careful, he said. You have just started a war with people who believe they own the world, and they do not like to lose. I walked out of the room, the key burning a hole in my pocket. The reception area was empty now, the expensive leather chairs vacant, the coffee cups cleared away, but the air still felt charged, heavy with the lingering aggression of the Reddicks. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and watched the numbers count down. I saw my reflection in the polished brass doors. I looked the same. Same blue scrubs, same tight bun, same tired eyes. But I wasn't the same. I was Hannah Cole. I was the granddaughter of a 4-star general. And I was holding the detonator that was going to blow this family's secrets sky high. I stepped into the elevator, and as the doors closed, shutting out the world of Barton, Cole, and Avery, I made a promise to the ghost of the woman who raised me. You hid me to keep me safe, Mom. I thought, but I'm not hiding anymore. Now, I'm going to finish what you started. I drove home in silence, my eyes checking the rearview mirror every few seconds, paranoid that a black SUV might be following my beat-up sedan. The city lights of Ridgeport blurred past, meaningless streaks of color. My mind was already inside that house, inside that safe. Whatever was in there, whatever truth my grandfather had locked away, it was going to hurt. I knew that. Truths that are buried for 30 years don't come out clean. They come out with dirt and roots and rot attached. But for the first time in my life, the fear wasn't paralyzing, it was fuel. I touched the key in my pocket one last time. Let them come, I thought. Let them try. The next morning, I drove my old, rust-covered pickup truck up a winding private road, the engine complaining in second gear. The Reddick estate was not in Ridgeport, it was above it. The truck, with its mismatched side panel and a persistent squeak in the suspension, felt like an obscenity crawling up the pristine asphalt driveway. I felt like one, too. The house was not a home, it was a statement. 3 stories of heavy, gray-blue stone. It seemed to have been carved directly from the mountainside. It commanded the view, looking down on the city with a kind of cold, permanent authority. An American flag, huge and immaculate, hung at half-mast from a 50-foot pole. The lawns were a deep, perfect green, mowed in precise, diagonal lines. It was beautiful, but it was a cold beauty, like a memorial. There was no life in it. I parked my truck behind the main house, in a cobblestone courtyard next to a 5-car garage, feeling like I was hiding it. I sat for a moment. The key Mr. Kane had given me heavy in my pocket. My hands were sweating. I was dressed in jeans and a plain t-shirt, my work scrubs in a bag in the back seat. I had come as Natalia. I had a feeling I was about to leave as someone else, before I could get out. The back door of the house opened. A woman in a simple black dress and a gray apron stepped out. Gloria Ames, the housekeeper. I had come to know her well during the General's last days. She was a small, wiry woman in her late 60s, with kind eyes and a spine made of steel. She had run this house for more than 25 years, seeing everything, saying nothing. She'd been the one to bring me coffee, her hands steady. When I'd been sitting with the General at 3 a.m, she saw me and her shoulders, which had been tense, visibly relaxed. A small, sad smile touched her lips. "Natalia," she said, "not Sergeant, not Ms. Chavez. I'm glad Mr. Kane sent you. I was worried." She trailed off. "Worried about what?" "Gloria." "The family," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Trent was here last night, after the reading. He was loud. He wanted to change the locks. Mr. Kane had to call security." She shook her head. "They have no shame." She ushered me inside, into a massive kitchen that looked like it belonged in a high-end restaurant. Copper pots hung from the ceiling, gleaming. "Mr. Kane called me this morning," she said, her back to me as she poured coffee I hadn't asked for. "He said you were here for an inventory, to see the General's study." "Something like that," I said, my voice noncommittal. Kane had been right to warn me. I couldn't trust anyone, not even Gloria, as much as I wanted to. "Well," she said, turning and handing me the mug. "Let's get it over with." She led me out of the kitchen and into the main part of the house. I had been here once or twice before, but always confined to the sick room and the kitchen. Now, I saw the full scope of it. The ceilings were 2 stories high, the floors were dark, polished wood, and the walls were a museum. We walked down a long, sunlit hallway. Every few feet, a framed photograph. The General with generals, the General with politicians, the General standing on the deck of an aircraft carrier, the General accepting a medal, his face young and hard. There were photos of his son, the one who had died, in a flight suit. There were photos of Trent as a boy, looking pouty, but there were gaps. I scanned the faces, looking for the woman in the photo Mr. Kane had shown me, Lena, my mother. The word felt foreign, wrong. There was nothing, no laughing, brown-haired girl, no baby. It was a history written with deliberate, surgical omissions. Someone had been erased. "This way," Gloria said. We went up a wide, curving staircase. The second floor was quieter, the air still. Gloria stopped in front of a small, unassuming door at the end of the hall. It was the only door that didn't match the others. It was plain, dark wood, with a simple, old-fashioned keyhole. "This is it," she said, her voice low. "The map room." He started calling it that after his son died. He'd lock himself in here, for hours, sometimes for days, especially these last few years. He was always writing. She looked at me, her eyes full of a question she didn't dare ask. "Mr. Kane said you had the key." My hand went to my pocket. I pulled out the steel key. I looked at Gloria, then at the lock. "He asked me to look at some papers," I said. A half-truth. Gloria nodded, her face impassive. She understood. She knew this was not a simple inventory. "I'll be downstairs," she said. "Yell if you need anything." She turned and walked away, her soft-soled shoes making no sound on the thick carpet. I was alone. I put the key in the lock. It was stiff from disuse. I had to jiggle it, push hard, until I felt the tumblers catch. With a dry, grating click that sounded impossibly loud in the silence, the lock turned. I pushed the door open. The air inside was stale, smelling of old paper, pipe tobacco, and something metallic. The room was small, dominated by a heavy, scarred oak desk. A single armchair was pulled up to it. On the wall opposite the door, a massive corkboard was covered, end to end, with a map of the United States. It was covered in red pins. I stepped closer. They were everywhere, clustered in small towns in Nevada, in cities in Texas, in the suburbs of Illinois, and a dense, angry cluster over Falcon Ridge Air Force Base in Colorado. My breath caught. These were not military movements. This was a search. He had been hunting. For me. My eyes scanned the room. Kane had been specific. Look for the photo. A frame of his old unit. In the corner, next to a bookshelf filled with military history, was a large, framed black and white photograph. It showed a group of young, tired-looking men in jungle fatigues. Vietnam. The general was in the front. Impossibly young. Not a general at all. Just a scared lieutenant. It was heavy. I lifted it off the wall, my heart hammering. Behind it, just as Kane had said, was a square of dull gray metal, a wall safe. The logo of Iron Gate Vaults was stamped in the center. I set the photo on the floor. The keypad was next to the handle. Kane had given me a code, the date his son died. I typed in the numbers. 06-19-1980. A small green light blinked. I turned the handle, pulled, and the heavy door swung open with a soft whoosh of air. It was not full of money. It was not full of jewels. It was full of my life. There was a thick black document box, a leather-bound photo album, and a small, navy blue velvet box, the kind that holds a single piece of jewelry. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grab them. I took everything out and carried it to the desk, shoving aside neat stacks of the general's papers. I sat in his chair. I opened the photo album first. The first page was a single photo. The general, young, in a civilian polo shirt, his arm around a laughing girl with wavy brown hair and a round, happy face. She looked about 16. Underneath, in the general's own precise, black ink script, Lena, summer at Stonebridge, before the world got in. Lena, my mother. I turned the page. More photos of her. Lena on a horse. Lena graduating high school, looking uncomfortable in a cap and gown. Lena, a few years older, her smile fading, her eyes looking haunted, and then, the last photo. My heart stopped. It was Lena, visibly pregnant, her hand resting on her stomach. She was standing in front of a rundown-looking apartment building, and next to her, her arm linked through hers, was a smiling blonde woman. Her hair cut in a style I remembered from my mother's oldest photos. Diane Langley. My mother. They were together. They were smiling. They looked like they were facing the world. Just the two of misters. I closed the album, my throat tight. I opened the black document box. It was full of letters, held in bundles with rubber bands. I pulled out the first bundle. They were letters from Lena, addressed to the general, but they were all stamped, return to sender, address unknown. He had never received them. He must have found them later, after her death. I read the first one. Her handwriting was a desperate scrawl. Uncle Mason, please, you have to help me. Uncle Richard, the general's younger brother, is trying to take the baby. He says I'm unfit. He says if I don't come home, if I don't let the child carry the Reddick name, he will file for guardianship the second it's born. He said he has judges who owe him favors. He said I won't stand a chance. He doesn't want me. He wants the heir. Please, I'm scared. He's not bluffing. He's threatening to ruin me. I read another. I'm at Falcon Ridge. I'm in hiding. I met someone. A nurse. Diane. She's my sister now. My real sister. She's going to help me. We're going to disappear. Tell Uncle Richard he'll never find us. He'll never get his hands on my baby. My hands were shaking. I found a final, single, folded piece of paper at the bottom of the box. It was not from Lena. The handwriting was different, familiar. It was my mother's looping, careful script. It was a letter, but it had no addressee. It had never been sent. I have to do this. Lena is too soft. She's too scared. She thinks if she just hides, they'll stop looking. But they won't. I've seen men like them. They don't see a baby. They see a bloodline. They see property, an inheritance. They will never stop. She wants to go back to him, the father. But I know he's weak. They'll crush him. So I'm making her run again. I'm going to take the baby. Tell Lena I'm taking it to a shelter for safety. But I'm not. I'm going to take her and I'm going to run. I'll go somewhere they'll never look. I'll change her name. I'll change my name. Lena can find me when it's safe. But I have to do this. I have to protect this baby. It's the only way. I'm sorry. Lena, forgive me. I have to save Hannah. My vision blurred. I was crying. Hot. Silent tears tracking down my face. My mother, Diane, she hadn't just found me. She had taken me. She had stolen me to save me. From Lena. From the Reddicks. From a life as an heir. My fingers fumbled with the last item. The small, navy blue velvet box. I opened it. Inside, on a bed of faded white satin, was a small, silver pendant. It was shaped like a single bird's wing, etched with fine detail. I lifted it out. It was heavy, real. I turned it over. On the back, in tiny, elegant script, were 2 letters, H.C. Hannah Cole. I closed my hand around the pendant, the metal biting into my palm. This was it. This was the truth. It was not a simple story of a lost granddaughter. It was a story of a terrified young mother, a predatory family, and a desperate act by the only person who saw me as a child and not a bargaining chip. I closed the album. I put the letters back in the box. I slid the pendant into my pocket, my fingers closing around it. Next to the key, I had my answers. I knew who I was. I was Hannah Cole. I was Natalia Chavez. I was the daughter of 2 different mothers, both of whom had tried, in their own broken ways, to save me. But sitting there, in the general's chair, surrounded by the evidence of his obsessive 30-year search, I didn't feel found. I felt weaponized. He had not just left me answers. He had left me a mission. He had pointed me, like a loaded gun, directly at the heart of the family that had torn his own apart. This was not just an inheritance. It was a war, and he had just given me my marching orders. My tears had dried, leaving my face stiff and my eyes burning. The emotional shock, the grief for 2 mothers I had in completely different ways, settled into something heavy and cold in my chest. I had the answers to my past, but the document box was not empty. Beneath the letters, beneath the velvet box with the pendant, was another, thicker bundle of papers. This was not personal. It was bound in a neat, professional-looking blue binder, the label, printed in the General's sharp, all-caps block lettering, read R. H. F. Audit. R. H. F. I recognized it. The Reddick Honor Fund. It was a name I saw all the time at the hospital. They were a major donor. They funded a wing. They sponsored events. They were, I had always assumed, one of the good ones, a pillar of the veteran community in Colorado. I opened the binder. It was not an audit. It was a massacre. It was filled with spreadsheets, bank statements, and wire transfer receipts. My medic's brain, trained for triage and pattern recognition, kicked in. The personal fog cleared, replaced by a cold, analytical focus. The General's spiky, angry handwriting was everywhere, scrawled in the margins in red ink. On the very first summary page, he had underlined the total disbursements for the previous fiscal year and written a single, damning sentence, more money out than in. Where's it going? Someone is turning my fund into a private vault. He had been investigating his own charity. He had been hunting his own family. I started flipping pages, following the money. Just as he had. The disbursements were huge, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the recipient for the largest, most consistent payments was a company I had never heard of, Redline Strategic Services. Redline Strategic Services, consulting fee, $75,000. Redline Strategic Services, security assessment, $120,000. Redline Strategic Services, logistical support, $90,000, month after month, a steady, massive bleed. The name Redline rang a faint, discordant bell. I thought back to the hospital, to the endless, arrogant bragging of Trent Reddick on his rare visits. He was boasting to a nurse about his private security company, how he was advising billionaires and handling assets in South America. Redline, this was Trent's company. He was consulting his great-uncle's charity, to the tune of nearly $1 million a year. I kept digging. The General had been more thorough than I could have imagined. I moved past the consulting black hole and got to the events and outreach budget. The numbers here were just as staggering. Veterans Wellness Retreat, $50,000. Wounded Warrior Golf Invitational, $80,000. It sounded good. It sounded supportive. Until I saw what the General had stapled to the invoices. He had gone on the internet. He had found Trent Reddick's social media. He had printed, in full, damning color, an Instagram post. There was Trent, his face flushed with sun and alcohol, a cigar clamped in his teeth, his arm around a woman in a tiny bikini. He was holding a golf club. The geotag was Clear Pebble Beach Resort. The caption, "Tough day at the office. Great time supporting the vets, winning charity, golf Redline," stapled to this photo, with a single, vicious, silver staple, was the $80,000 invoice for the Wounded Warrior Golf Invitational. The General had even added a note in the margin. I count 2 people. Neither is a veteran. I felt a new kind of anger. It was not the aching of personal grief I'd felt over the letters. This was a cold, pure, righteous fury. It was the fury of Sergeant Chavez. I thought of my patients. I thought of old man Henderson, who couldn't get his wheelchair ramp fixed for 8 months because the VA was out of discretionary funds. I thought of Maria, a young E4 who was fighting, literally fighting, for 6 extra physical therapy sessions for her prosthetic leg. And here was Trent Reddick, using their names, their honor, to fund his golf trips, using money meant for them to pay his consulting fees. He was not just a greedy nephew. He was a parasite. He was a grave robber, stealing from the living. They hadn't just tried to steal a baby, to possess an heir. They were actively, systematically, stealing from the very community I had sworn my life to, the community the General had built his name on. I found one last piece of paper in the binder. It was not a statement. It was a handwritten memo on the General's personal letterhead, addressed to Elliot Kane. Elliot, it read, I am attaching my findings regarding the fund. It's worse than we thought. Trent is laundering money through his own company. He's a damn fool, but he's a greedy one, and he's insulated himself. Now, I have found her. The girl. The medic, Natalia. The DNA is a match. If she is who I think she is, if she has half the steel in her spine that her grandmother, my sister, had, then the inheritance must come with responsibility. I will not have my name, my legacy, turned into an empty PR stunt for these vultures. If she is truly my blood, she will know what to do. The money is a tool. I want her to clean house. I sat back, the letter shaking in my hand. He had not just left me answers. He had left me a mission. He had not called me to the will reading to give me a fortune. He had called me to entrust me with one. He was not an old, senile man. As Trent had sneered, he was a brilliant, dying strategist, moving his last piece on the board. And I was it. I thought of Gloria, the housekeeper. I remembered her telling me, back at the hospital, how the general would get so agitated. He gets on the phone with Mr. Trent, she'd whispered, wringing a cloth in her hands. He shouts about the fund, about honor, and then Mr. Trent shouts back. He mentions the missing child, and the general, he just deflates. He hangs up, every time. It had been blackmail. Trent knew about the missing child. He knew the general was looking, and he had used it as a shield. He had used the general's grief and guilt over Lena as leverage to keep him from looking too closely at the stolen money. The pieces clicked into place. They were reading. The public question. Do you know who your parents are? It was not a random cruelty. It was the general's final move, executed by Kane. It was designed to detonate the one piece of leverage Trent had, to bring the secret out into the open, neutralizing the blackmail, and clearing the field for the real fight, the money, the fund, the legacy. I stood up from the desk, my movements sharp, precise. The medic was gone. The sergeant was in command. I pulled out my cell phone. I had Elliot Kane's number. He had given it to me on a crisp, heavy business card. I dialed. He picked up on the first ring. Mr. Kane, this is Natalia Chavez. I'm at the house. I've been through the safe. I was wondering when you would call. His voice was calm, steady. Did you find what you were looking for? I found who I am, I said, my voice cold. And then I found the golf trips. A short, dry bark of a sound. It might have been a laugh. He was thorough, wasn't he? So, you understand. I understand he was being blackmailed and robbed by his own nephew, I said. I understand that this Reddick Honor Fund is a piggy bank for a spoiled child. Now, I need you to tell me what happens next. I need to see the full will, every single word pertaining to the fund. That, Kane said, is the most important part. I was waiting for you to ask. Natalia, what I'm about to tell you is the real reason the Reddick family will try to burn you to the ground. This isn't just about the estate. It's about the cash flow. Read it to me, I said. I heard the rustle of papers. The general's final addendum, dated 6 months ago, rewrote the entire governance of the Reddick Honor Fund, the control, its assets, its board, and all disbursements. Do not pass to his next of kin. They pass to a designated honorary heir. And that heir is me, I said. It was not a question. The addendum is very specific, Kane said, his voice precise. He defines the heir, and I quote, an individual who has honorably served in the United States Armed Forces and who has provided direct personal medical care to me in the last 12 months of my life. A chill ran down my spine, but it was not from fear, it was from recognition. He wrote that clause for me, I whispered. He knew. He wrote it so it could only be you, Kane corrected. You are the only person on this planet who fits that legal description. He didn't just find his granddaughter. Sergeant, he found his successor. He found his weapon. The weight of it hit me. So, if I accept this, you don't just get the house, Natalia. Kane's voice was grim. "You get the fund. You get control. You take away Trent's inheritance, and you seize his personal bank, all in one legal move. You cut him off at the knees. That is the real inheritance, Natalia. And that is why they will fight you with everything they have." I hung up the phone. I looked out the window of the study. Over the perfectly manicured, cold, empty lawns, my whole life, I had been an unknown, a file error, an orphan. I'd been running, even when I did not know I was running. Now I knew, and I knew what I had to do. This was not about revenge for Hannah Cole, the stolen baby. Not anymore. This was about justice. For the old man who had spent 30 years looking for me. For the patients I saw every day, who were being spit on by the very people pretending to help them. This was not an inheritance. It was a field hospital, and it was under attack, and I was the only medic on the field. I closed the binder. I picked up the box of letters. I walked out of the room, locking the door behind me. I was not a victim. I was not an heir. I was the executor. It took less than 12 hours for the war to go public. The next morning, I walked out of my apartment building at 5:30, my gym bag over one shoulder, my mind a fog of legal strategies and stolen babies. I was halfway to my truck before I saw him, a man in a stained hoodie, leaning against the neighboring building, smoking. He lifted a camera with a lens as long as my forearm. The flash was blinding. "Natalia, is it true? The general left you everything." I froze, stunned. The flash went off again, spots dancing in my vision. "How long were you planning it, Natalia?" A second voice shouted. A woman, hard-faced and holding a digital recorder, was suddenly at my elbow. "How does a medic get a 4-star general to change his will?" "Get out of my way," I said, my voice low. I shouldered past her, fumbling for my keys. "They say you were holding his hand when he died," the man with the camera yelled, jogging backward to keep me in frame. "Gave him more than just medicine. Did you—" My keys clattered to the pavement. As I bent to grab them, the flash exploded again. I felt a surge of pure, hot rage. I was 2 seconds from putting him on the ground. I was trained to disable a man twice his size. Instead, I snatched my keys, threw myself into the truck, and slammed the door. I locked it. They banged on the glass, their faces distorted and ghoulish in the pre-dawn light. I jammed the key into the ignition, my hands shaking so hard it took 3 tries. The engine roared to life, and I peeled out of the parking spot, leaving them standing in my exhaust. I drove to a 24-hour donut shop, not the hospital, and sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. My phone, which had been silent, buzzed. It was a link from an unknown number. I clicked it. The Ridgeport Gazette, a local, trashy tabloid. The headline was massive, splashed over a photo of me. It was a picture they must have stolen from the hospital's Our Heroes newsletter. Medic, millionaire, hero, nurse, or gold digger. They had pictures. God, they had pictures. Someone, one of the family, must have been taking them. Me, pushing the general in his wheelchair in the hospital garden. The photo was cropped tight, making it look like we were alone, intimate. Me, adjusting his blanket. Me, laughing at one of his stories. My hand resting on his forearm. And the worst one, me, holding his hand. It was the night of the bleed, when his breathing was shallow and I was trying to keep him tethered to the world. They had cropped it, zoomed in, made a moment of simple, human comfort look like a transaction. The article was poison. It was filled with anonymous family sources who were deeply concerned that the general had been unduly influenced in his final, confused days. It painted me as a predator, a pretty, ambitious young woman who had preyed on a lonely old man. It mentioned I came from a troubled, unknown background. They were already building the narrative Kane had warned me about. They were painting me as a whore and a thief. The threat started an hour later. As I was walking into my shift, my phone buzzed again. A text from a blocked number. "You don't belong with that name. You think you can just steal a good family's money." Another, "Give the money back. It's your only warning. We know where you live." And then the emails. routed through some encrypted service to my personal account. We're going to dig. We're going to find out who you really are. You'll wish you had never heard the name Reddick. My skin was crawling. I walked through the hospital doors, and for the first time, the place that had always been my sanctuary felt like a fishbowl. I could feel the stares, the nurses at the station, whispering, their conversations stopping when I got close, the orderlies, giving me a wide berth. The news was already here. Natalia, I turned. Dr. Eris Thorne, my chief physician, was standing outside the charge nurse's station. He was a good man, a former Navy doctor who ran his ER with a calm precision I had always respected. He did not look calm. My office? Now. My stomach turned to ice. I followed him. The walk down the hall felt a mile long. He closed the door behind us, the click of the lock sounding final. Sit down, he said. He did not sit. He stood, arms crossed, looking at the floor. He looked angry and tired. What is this? Dr. Thorne? I got a call, he said, rubbing his face. Not from a lawyer. From a senator who happens to be on the board of this hospital, who happens to be a very, very old friend of the Reddick family. Sir, I have a formal written complaint on my desk. Natalia, from the Reddick family. They are accusing you of gross professional misconduct. They are accusing you of violating ethical boundaries. They are accusing you, and I quote, of leveraging a patient's medical vulnerability to influence legal and financial decisions. I felt the blood drain from my face. That is a lie. Is it? He asked, his voice sharp. He looked up, and his eyes were not friendly. Is it a lie that you spent hours with him, off shift? Is it a lie that you were in his room, alone, holding his hand? Is it a lie that you're now in his will? I was his primary medic, I said, my voice rising. He was my patient. He was scared, and his family was never there. I was doing my job. Your job is not to be his granddaughter. He shot back. The word hung in the air. He knew. That's what they're saying, he said, his voice dropping. That's the narrative, that you're some long-lost relative, and you used your position as a medic to get close to him, confirm it, and get him to change the will. He asked me to be there, I said, my voice shaking with a rage I was barely controlling. He requested me. You know he did. All I know, Dr. Thorne said, pacing, is that my best medic is on the front page of a trash-fire tabloid. The board is screaming. The family is threatening to sue the hospital for malpractice and negligence. They are claiming we allowed a predator, you, access to a vulnerable patient. And you believe them? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. He stopped pacing. He looked at me, his gaze long and searching. Finally, he sighed, the anger seeming to go out of him, leaving behind something worse bureaucracy. No, I don't, he said. I'm the one who approved the request. I was in the room. The general was as sharp as a damn tack, even on morphine. He told me, face to face, I only want Sergeant Chavez. She's the only one here who isn't scared of me. I put that in my official report. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. So, you'll fight them. I will testify, he corrected, truthfully, which is that the general requested you, and I, as his physician, approved it based on his mental competence and his own stated preference for care. I will protect the hospital, and I will protect my own license, you. He looked at me. You're in a different kind of trouble. I'm putting you on administrative leave, effective immediately. What, you can't? That's admitting guilt. That is procedure, he snapped. You are at the center of a massive, high-profile legal battle. You're a witness. You're a participant. You cannot be an employee. Not right now. Go home. Natalia, call your lawyer. I stood up, my legs feeling weak. I had just been attacked at my job. In my home, my entire identity, the one I had built for myself, was being systematically dismantled. This is what they want, I whispered. They're isolating me. Then let's hope your lawyer is as good as they say. Dr. Thorne said, turning back to his desk. "You're a good medic, Chavez, one of the best. I hope to God you're not a fool." I walked out of his office in a daze. I cleaned out my locker, the whispers of the other staff following me like a physical weight. I felt like a leper. By the time I got to the parking garage, I was shaking. I sat in my truck, the administrative leave form on the passenger seat. They had done it. They had cut me off from my life. I had no job. I had no home. Not really. With paparazzi outside. I was alone. My phone rang. It was Elliot Kane. "They did it," I said, my voice flat, dead. "They got me put on leave." "I know. I just received the complaint. It's sloppy. It's all emotion and no facts. We can fight it." "He called me a fool," I said. "You're not a fool, Natalia." Kane's voice was sharp. "You're a soldier, and you've just been hit. Now you get up and you hit back. They are trying to build a narrative that you manipulated a dying, senile old man. They are going to drag you through the mud, and they are going to try and make you so toxic that no judge in the country will believe you. Don't let them." "How? Elliot. How do I fight this? They're lying about me in the press. They've poisoned my job." "You fight it with the truth. Go home. Lock your door. I'll send a private security car to sit on your building. Do not talk to anyone. We're filing to probate the will tomorrow. The battle begins now." I hung up and drove home. The anonymous security car, a black sedan, falling in behind me 2 blocks from my apartment. The paparazzi were still there, but they kept their distance from the bored-looking man in the suit who got out of the sedan and just stood there, arms crossed. I locked my apartment door, bolted it, and leaned against it, sliding to the floor. My own home felt like a cage. I must have sat there for an hour, just silent, broken. A noise made me jump. Someone had slid something under my door. I scrambled back, my heart pounding. I stared at the door. A plain, 9x12 manila envelope was sitting on my doormat. I crept forward. I didn't hear anyone in the hall. The security guard was downstairs. How had I snatched the envelope? There was no name, no writing. I ripped it open. Inside was a single, black USB flash drive and a small, folded piece of paper. The handwriting was shaky, elegant, and clearly from an older person. He saw this coming. He knew what they were. Listen, my blood went cold. I looked at the USB drive. This was a trap. This was them, planting something. Or was it? He saw this coming. I walked to my laptop, my mind racing. Who had written this Gloria? The housekeeper, one of the cousins. The quiet one I'd seen in the back. I plugged in the drive, a single file. M.R.T. R. March, MP3. Mason Reddick, Trent Reddick, March. I put on my headphones, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I clicked play. The audio was clear. It sounded like it was recorded in a study. The general's voice was weaker than I remembered, but the steel was still there. "General Reddick, and I am telling you, Trent, for the last time, you will not use the fund's money for your disastrous side projects. It is for the veterans. Trent Reddick." Reddick. Sounding bored, arrogant. "It's just moving money. Uncle, it's logistics. You're too old to understand it. General Reddick. I understand theft when I see it. And I understand this. That medic. Sergeant Chavez. She saved my life. I have looked into her. She is a fine soldier, and she is the one I'm trusting." Trent Reddick. A sharp, ugly laugh. "Her. You're bringing her into this. A nobody. A little gold-digging nurse who bats her eyes at you." General Reddick voice like a gunshot. "Stop. You will not call the person who saved my life a gold digger. You say that word one more time in my presence, and I will call Kane, and I will have your name struck from my will entirely. I will leave you with nothing. Is that clear?" There was a long, cold silence, and then Trent's voice came back. It was no longer bored. It was cold, cold as the grave. "Trent Reddick. You need to be careful. Uncle, you really do. If you do this, if you try to make this grand gesture because of your family's lost kid, you are going to drag us all down. She's nothing. She is a playing card. Do you understand me? A ghost? You try to play her, and you will burn this entire family to the ground. She doesn't matter. My hand flew to my mouth. I stopped the recording. He knew. Trent knew. He had known, all this time, about the lost kid. He knew I existed. He called me a playing card, a ghost. I listened to it again and again. The general, defending me. Trent, admitting, in his own cold, transactional way, that he knew exactly who I was and that he saw me as nothing more than an obstacle, a card. This was not a trap. This was a weapon. Someone inside that house had recorded this. Someone had held on to it, and someone had risked everything to get it to me. I stood up. I walked into my small, cheap bathroom and looked in the mirror. The person looking back was not the victim I had been an hour ago. My eyes were dark, rimmed with exhaustion and fear, but there was something else in them. It was a look I recognized. It was the look I had seen on my own face in the reflection of a Humvee mirror after a 12-hour firefight, covered in dust and someone else's blood. It was the look of a warrior. I was not a fool. I was not a gold digger, and I was not a ghost. I was Sergeant Natalia Chavez, and I was being activated. I picked up my phone. "Elliot," I said, my voice clear and cold. "They made a mistake. They hit me. Now I'm going to hit back, and I have the ammunition." The administrative leave gave me one thing my life as a medic had never afforded time, and I was going to use every second of it. Elliot Kane's office became my new command post. We turned the same small, windowless conference room, where he had interrogated me, into a war room. The table was no longer empty. It was covered in a rapidly expanding mountain of evidence: my black binder from the general's safe, the new audio file, and now, the stack of legal filings from Trent's team. "They are contesting the will on 2 grounds, Elliot said, tapping a thick document with his pen. He was in shirt sleeves, his tie loosened, a sign of battle that I, as a former soldier, respected. First, lack of testamentary capacity. They are going to paint the general as a dazed, senile old man who was addled by morphine and grief. Second, and this is the one aimed at you, undue influence." "The gold digger," I said, my voice flat. "The gold digger," he agreed, with no humor. "They will argue that you, a medical professional, violated every ethical code, that you preyed on his loneliness, fabricated a personal connection, and convinced him to write his family out of his life." "So how do we kill it?" I asked. "You kill it," he said, "by being exactly what you are, a professional. We are not going to argue that you were his long-lost granddaughter. We are going to argue that you were his medic. You will be our star witness, and your testimony has to be flawless. It has to be cold, clinical, professional." We spent the next 2 days doing just that. He grilled me. He played the part of Trent's high-priced, shark-toothed lawyer, and he was terrifyingly good at it. "Sergeant Chavez, did you hold his hand?" he'd bark. "Yes, sir. To check his pulse and capillary refill, and to provide comfort during an episode of acute anxiety, which was presenting as tachycardia." "Did you talk to him about his family?" "No, sir. He spoke to me about his... I was instructed to engage in conversational therapy as part of his cognitive and emotional care plan." "Did you call him Grandpa?" "No, sir," I said, my voice sharp. I never called him by his first name. He was General or Sir at all times. In fact, he insisted on it. He said he was still an officer, not an invalid, and he demanded that level of respect. I have it noted in my charts. "Did he take morphine?" "He refused it," I said, leaning forward, the memory clear and strong. "He was in significant pain, but he refused his morphine drip on at least 3 occasions. When I asked him why, he said, and I quote, 'I have papers to sign. Sergeant, I will not sign my name when I am floating on a cloud.'" He was lucid, he was in command, and he was in pain, by choice, to maintain his faculties. Elliot pointed his pen at me. "That, right there, That is the stake we drive through the heart of their entire case. Your professionalism is our shield. His lucidity is our sword. He was satisfied with my testimony prep, but not with our evidence. The audio file is a bombshell, he said, tapping the USB drive. But it only proves Trent is a monster. It doesn't definitively prove the financial motive. We need to connect the fund to their desperation to invalidate you. The binder from the safe isn't enough. It's a start, Elliot said. But it's the general's private, angry notes. A good lawyer could paint it as the paranoid ramblings of an old man. We need the actual numbers. We need the internal communication. We need the proof of the fraud that Trent was using your existence to cover up. I know where to look, I said. He had a full office in the house, not just the map room. His main files. The house is a war zone, Elliot said. Trent's lawyers have filed a motion to seal the property. A motion that's pending, I countered. You're still the executor for another 24 hours. I have a right to be there to finish my inventory. I just need to get in. Gloria will let me in. Elliot looked at me. A long, appraising stare. Don't get caught. If they find you there, this gets much, much uglier. I was trained in reconnaissance, Mr. Kane, I said. I know how to be quiet. I drove my truck to the estate at dusk, parking not in the courtyard, but in a small service turnout a quarter-mile down the road. I walked up the driveway through the trees, a ghost in the deepening shadows. As I approached the house, I saw someone, standing by the locked front gate, a place with no cover. Was a figure, a woman. She was looking up at the massive stone house, her posture a mix of fear and resolve. I recognized her. It was Mara, the quiet cousin from the will reading, the one with the cheap shoes and the terrified, darting eyes. I stepped out from the trees. Mara, she screamed, a small, choked sound, and spun around, clutching a thick document binder to her chest as if it were a shield. Natalia, God, you scared me. I was waiting for me. How did you know I'd be here? I didn't, she said, her voice a reedy whisper. I knew I had to come. I can't let him do this. Him, Trent. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. I'm the one, she whispered, her voice cracking. I sent you the USB. My body went on high alert. How did you get it? I'm an accountant, she said, as if it were a confession. A junior one. Trent, he thinks I'm an idiot, so he had me working on the family books, the Reddick Honor Fund. It was my job to reconcile the expenses, to make the golf trips look like outreach. You were signing off on it, I said, my voice flat. I had to, she cried, tears now streaming down her face. He told me if I ever said anything, my career would be over, that my father's mortgage, which he holds, would be foreclosed. He has us. He has all the poor Reddicks. We're trapped. I was forced to sign. But I started making copies. And the general, he knew. He asked me questions. In secret. He was on to Trent. So I recorded that conversation. For him. For protection. I never got to give it to him. She was shaking so hard the binder rattled. What is that? Mara. She held it out to me. More copies. This is what you really need. This is the proof Elliot Kane will want. I took the binder from her. I opened it right there, in the dying light. It was an executioner's ledger. Printed emails. Trent, to her. With subject lines like, needs fixing. The body of the emails were blunt. Inflate the consultant fees by 40%. I need the difference by Friday. This event budget is too low. Double it. I'll handle the invoicing from Redline. And then, I saw the other file. A memo. A transcript of a family-only meeting I was never meant to see. It was dated 3 years ago. The subject, the lost heir contingency. My blood ran cold. It was a legal discussion. What to do if the general's missing grandchild was ever found? The language was cold, transactional. They referred to me as the asset or the biological, one line, from Trent's uncle, Richard, the one who had threatened Lena, jumped off the page. If found, we must immediately move to gain guardianship or conservatorship. Establish her as unstable. If she's a minor, easy. If she's an adult, it's harder. But we can use the mother's instability as precedent. The goal is to control the asset. The bloodline is a piece of property, and we must secure it for the family. They had a plan to have me declared legally insane, a plan to take my life, my identity, and lock it away, all to secure their inheritance. That they're not just thieves, I whispered. They're monsters. They're just family, Mara said, her voice broken. And they are terrified of you, because you're the first person who isn't. Please, she said, grabbing my arm. Please take him down, but be careful. He's not just a bully. He's dangerous. Why are you doing this? Mara, I asked. You're risking everything. Because, she said, wiping her face. I'm a Reddick, and I'm ashamed of what that means. It's time someone wasn't. Before I could say anything else, a voice cut through the twilight. I thought I might find you two here. We both spun. Gloria, the housekeeper, was standing on the porch, a heavy iron keyring in her hand. Her face was a mask of grim determination. You're going to catch your death out here, she said. Get inside. And you, she said, pointing to me. You look like you're about to start a war. You'll need this. She led us, not through the main house, but through the kitchen, and into her small, neat office off the pantry. She unlocked a metal file cabinet and pulled out a simple, black and red ledger, the kind you buy at any office supply store. I've worked for this family for 30 years, Gloria said, placing it on the table. I've seen it all, and I write it all down. She opened the book. It was a diary, a log, dates, times, and quotes. March 14th, 10:30 p.m. General and Mr. Trent, shouting again. Mr. T said, "The fund is my right." General threw a book, said, "It is my honor, and you are staining it." April 2nd, 4:00 a.m. General couldn't sleep. I brought him tea. He was crying. He said, "Gloria, he is using my guilt about Lena to rob me blind." June 10th, after the call from the hospital, the general was happy. He said, "I think I found her. Gloria, I think I found Hannah, and she's a soldier. She's not a tool. I will not let them turn her into a tool." It was a witness journal. A contemporaneous log of the general's state of mind, his fights with Trent, and his intention for me. It was the human proof to Mara's financial data. I looked at Mara, crying silently in the corner. I looked at Gloria, her hand resting on her ledger, her face set in stone. I was not alone. "They're digging up a whole system," Elliot said. He was staring at Mara's binder and Gloria's ledger, spread out on his conference table. It was the next morning. His voice was full of a strange, cold awe. "Natalia, this is not defending a will anymore. This is a full-blown corporate and criminal case. We're digging up a grave." His assistant buzzed. "Mr. Kane, Trent Reddick's lawyer is on line 1. He sounds eager." Elliot looked at me. He pressed the speakerphone button. "Kane speaking." Elliot, a smooth, oily voice filled the room. "Good morning. Listen, I've spoken with my client. We all feel this situation has gotten overheated. This public spectacle isn't good for anyone. The family is prepared to be generous." "Generous," Elliot repeated, his voice deadpan. They are willing to offer Miss Chavez a substantial 7-figure settlement. In return, she, of course, waives any and all claims to the estate, and more specifically, to the governance of the honor fund. They'll also drop the complaint at the hospital. This all goes away. She can go back to her life, a very, very wealthy version of it. "And if she refuses?" Elliot asked. The lawyer's voice lost its smoothness. "Then tell her to check the tabloids tomorrow. We are just getting started. We will bury her. This is her one and only chance to walk away with her reputation and a full bank account. I'll expect your call." The line clicked dead. Elliot looked at me. Well, they're terrified. That audio file. Our request for discovery, they're trying to plug the leak before the dam breaks. What do you want to do? I thought about the money. 7 figures. More money than I had ever dreamed of. Enough to disappear. Enough to be safe. I thought of my mother, running her whole life. I picked up the phone. Give me your lawyer's number. Elliot, I'm not going to counter. Elliot's face fell. Natalia. I'm not going to counter, I said, dialing. I'm going to give him my own terms. A new voice answered, sharp, impatient. This is Jonathan Price. Mr. Price, I said, my voice as cold and clear as a winter morning. This is Natalia Chavez. I'm calling you directly to save time. I'm rejecting your client's offer. Miss Chavez, he started, his voice full of condescension. I strongly advise you. You will not advise me. I cut him off. Here is my one and only offer. I will consider dropping my claim to the estate, not the fund, if, and only if, Trent Reddick agrees, by 9 a.m. tomorrow, to a full, independent, forensic audit of the entire Reddick Honor Fund, going back 10 years, the results of which are to be made public. There was a sound on the other end of the phone, a choked, sputtering noise. He had literally gasped. That is preposterous. That is not on the table. It is the only thing on the table, I said. You tell your client. He can give up the money and face the public, or he can fight me in court and lose the money and the fund and face a criminal investigation. I hung up. Elliot was staring at me, a slow, wide grin spreading across his face. It was the first time I had ever seen him smile. The call had worked. It had flushed Trent out. He was waiting for me that night. In the parking garage of my own apartment building, the security guard was posted at the front, but Trent had used his money and connections to get in the back. I stepped off the elevator, and he stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. You think you're smart, he spat. He was not the composed, arrogant man from the will reading. His suit was wrinkled, his face was pale and sweaty, and his eyes were wild. I stopped. I did not move back. I just stood, my gym bag in my hand, and looked at him. You don't get it, do you? He said, taking a step toward me. You're a nurse, a nobody. My family built this city. We own this. You cannot win. You are not strong enough. The mud we're going to sling you won't survive it. My family does not lose. Is that what this is? I asked, my voice quiet. A game you can't lose. It's not a game, he shouted, his voice echoing in the concrete garage. It's my life. It's my name. And you're trying to steal it. I looked at him, really looked at him. The spoiled, panicked man who was using my patient's money to buy golf clubs. The man who had called me a ghost. You're wrong. Trent, I said, and I took a step toward him. He instinctively flinched. You're not used to this, I said. You're used to fighting with silent people, with ghosts, with women who are too scared to speak up, with old men you can blackmail. I dropped my gym bag. I'm not my mother. I'm not silent. And I'm not a ghost. I walked past him, toward the door to the lobby. You threatened my lawyer, I said, my back to him. You threatened me. You're trying to buy me off. That's what scared people do. You are going to lose. Trent, you are going to lose your money. You are going to lose the fund, and you are going to lose your name, and I am going to be the one to take it from you. I left him there, standing in the garage, his mouth open, his face a mask of impotent rage. The final week before the hearing began, it was not just a probate case anymore. It was not just a fight over money. It was a trial for an entire way of life, the Reddick way, built on secrets, threats, and stolen money, versus my way, the truth, and I was finally fully ready to fight. The district courthouse was a circus. When Elliot and I walked up the front steps, a wall of cameras and microphones hit us. It was like the morning at my apartment, but 100 times worse. Flashes exploded in my face, and a dozen shouted questions hit me at once. Miss Chavez, Is it true you're a long-lost Reddick? Natalia, are the gold digger rumors true? How much money are you asking for? I felt Elliot's hand on my back, a firm, grounding pressure. Eyes forward. Sergeant, he murmured, his voice too low for anyone else to hear. Do not engage. We are walking to the objective. I locked my eyes on the courthouse doors, and we moved through the mob like a single, armored unit. The inside of the building was no better. The lobby was packed. The Reddick family had arrived, and they hadn't come for a legal proceeding. They had come for a premiere. The women were dressed in dark, expensive suits that looked more like couture than mourning. The men, including Trent, were in immaculate pinstripes, their faces set in masks of solemn, offended dignity. They were performing. They were the grieving, wronged family, and I was the interloper who had brought this public shame upon them. We pushed our way into the courtroom. It was standing room only. The press had filled half the gallery. The Reddick family, a solid 20-person block of tailored wool, took up the first 3 rows on the right, and on the left, in the back, I saw them, a group of about 30 men and women. Some were in old, faded fatigues, some were in wheelchairs, some wore VFW hats. It was Mr. Henderson, the man who couldn't get his ramp. It was Maria, the E4 with the prosthetic. It was a silent, grim-faced jury of my peers, my patients. One of them held a small, hand-painted sign that just said, "Vets for Chavez." A bailiff immediately confiscated the sign, but the message had been sent. I felt a lump form in my throat. I was not alone. "All rise," the bailiff shouted. The judge entered. She was an older woman, Judge Eleanor Vance, with a reputation for suffering no fools. She looked out over the packed room, her gaze sweeping over the press and the family, and her expression was one of profound irritation. This was already a circus, and she knew it. "Mr. Price," she said, looking at Trent's lawyer. "You may begin." Jonathan Price, the man I had spoken to on the phone, uncoiled himself from the plaintiff's table. He was exactly as I'd pictured, tall, silver-haired, and exuding an aura of effortless, expensive superiority. He was a shark, and this was his ocean. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said, his voice a smooth, reasonable baritone that filled the room. "We are here today for a simple, and very sad, reason. We are here to protect the legacy of a great American hero, Major General Mason Reddick." He paced in front of the judge's bench, a picture of solemn duty. "We will show," he said, "that in the last, tragic months of his life, this great man, addled by pain, grief, and powerful, mind-altering narcotics, was targeted. He was targeted by a person he should have been able to trust, a medical professional who, in a grotesque violation of her sacred oath, leveraged her position of power." He turned and, for the first time, pointed directly at me. "He was targeted by Miss Natalia Chavez." A murmur went through the room. I sat perfectly still, my hands clasped in my lap, my expression neutral. Elliot had coached me for this. You are a stone. You are a professional. You do not react. Price spent the next hour painting a masterpiece of my villainy. He was good. He was terrifyingly good. He wove a narrative of a lonely old man and a cunning, ambitious young woman, and then he brought out the proof. "Your Honor, we submit into evidence these photographs, taken at the VA hospital." He placed them on the projector. The first was the picture from the tabloid Me, pushing the general's wheelchair in the garden, cropped so tightly it looked like a romantic stroll. "We see Miss Chavez, off duty, alone with the general." The next one, me, laughing at one of his jokes, my hand on his forearm. "We see intimacy, Your Honor, a physical connection that far exceeds the bounds of a professional relationship." And the last one, me, holding his hand. "And here," Price's voice dropped, full of sad disapproval, "we see the final, undeniable proof. This is not medical care. This is a seduction, a calculated campaign to win the affection and the fortune of a vulnerable patient. Elliot finally stood up. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is testifying, and he is a failed romance novelist. He is ascribing a motive to a photograph that shows nothing more than a medic comforting a patient. That hand he finds so seductive. Miss Chavez was monitoring the general's pulse rate during a moment of distress. Noted, Mr. Kane, the judge said, her voice dry. Let's all try to keep our imaginations in check. Shall we? Mr. Price, move on. Price was not deterred. Very well. The plaintiff calls Natalia Chavez to the stand. My heart hammered. This was it. I stood, walked to the stand, and was sworn in. I did not look at Trent. I did not look at the jury. I looked at the judge. Price smiled at me. It was not a nice smile. Miss Chavez, he began. Or is it Hannah Cole? The room went silent. My legal name is Natalia Chavez, I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the microphone. But you were Hannah Cole, weren't you? Price said, walking toward me. An inconvenient fact. Just as it's an inconvenient fact that your birth certificate lists no father, unknown, I believe it says, objection. Elliot was on his feet. Counsel is badgering the witness, and this line of questioning is completely irrelevant. Her parentage has nothing to do with the general's state of mind. On the contrary, Your Honor, Price shot back. It has everything to do with it. We are establishing a pattern. We will show that Miss Chavez, a person of, shall we say, ambiguous origins, discovered a potential distant bloodline to a very, very wealthy family, and she then took steps to exploit that unproven, unverified connection. The judge frowned. I'll allow it, for now. But you are on a very short leash, Mr. Price. Get to the point. He turned back to me, the smile gone, replaced by a surgeon's cold precision. You're a person with no family, no connections, he said, and suddenly, you're assigned to care for a millionaire general. What a coincidence. Tell me, Miss Chavez, how many hours a week does a medic at the VA work? My shifts were 40 hours a week, sir. 40 hours. And yet, he produced a new document. I have here a nursing log, signed by a charge nurse, one Patricia Riley, on March 10th. She notes, and I quote, Nurse Chavez still here. That's 12 hours post-shift. This is the third time this week. She seems obsessed with patient Reddick. Were you obsessed, Miss Chavez? I saw Trent lean forward, a smirk playing on his lips. This was their ace. This was the proof from inside the hospital. Objection, Elliot said calmly. Hearsay and speculation. The note uses the word obsessed, which is a conclusion, not a fact. Sustained, the judge said. The witness will not answer the last question, but she will answer the first. Were you there? 12 hours after your shift ended. Yes, sir, I said. Price's smile returned. He looked at the jury box. 12 hours. Thank you. Miss Chavez, no further questions. I had been on the stand for 10 minutes, and he had just painted me as a fatherless, obsessed stalker who had lied about her own name. I walked back to my seat, my face burning, my hands shaking. He's good, I whispered to Elliot. He is, Elliot said, not looking at me. But he's also an arrogant bastard who didn't read the whole file. The defense calls Nurse Patricia Riley, Elliot said. The charge nurse, a heavy-set woman with a tired face, was sworn in. Elliot was gentle. Nurse Riley, you've been a nurse for 20 years. 22, she said, her voice nervous. And you were the charge nurse on General Reddick's floor. Yes, sir. And you wrote this note, Elliot said, projecting it. She seems obsessed. You wrote that? Yes, sir, she said, looking down. And why did you write it? Nurse Riley took a deep breath. I was frustrated. We were short-staffed, and the general was a difficult patient. He was refusing his pain medication. He was refusing to be seen by the night staff. He would only deal with Sergeant Chavez. Elliot perked up. He would only deal with Miss Chavez. Yes, sir. He was adamant. He was well. He was a general. He gave orders. He said, "I will not have a stranger change my dressings. I will not discuss my pain levels with a child." That's what he called the residents. He said, "I want Sergeant Chavez. She's a soldier. She understands. Get her." So, I had to call her, at home, on her day off. I had to beg her to come in, because the general was refusing all care. The courtroom was silent. "So," Elliot said, his voice soft, "when you wrote that Natalia Chavez was spending 12 hours post-shift at the hospital, was she there as a stalker, Nurse Riley? Or was she there because you, her superior, and the patient himself demanded her presence?" Nurse Riley looked up, her gaze firm. "She was there because I ordered her to be, and thank God she was. He was the most stubborn man I've ever met. She was the only one who could get him to take his blood pressure medication." "Thank you, nurse," Elliot said. No further questions. Price looked like he had been slapped. He had no redirect. "The defense calls Natalia Chavez," Elliot said. I was back on the stand. This time, it was different. Elliot stood in front of me. "Sergeant Chavez, Mr. Price painted you as a gold digger. So, I must ask you, are you interested in the general's money?" "No, sir," I said. "Then why are you here? Why are you fighting this family?" "Because of the Reddick Honor Fund," I said, and I turned, for the first time, to the press, to the gallery, to the veterans in the back. I served in Afghanistan. I was a combat medic. I have sat in the dust, and I have held the hands of 19-year-old boys while they bled to death. I have seen veterans come home with half their bodies and all of their minds destroyed, and I have seen them fight for basic care, for a piece of plastic to help them walk, for an hour of therapy. "This fund," I said, my voice thick with an anger I did not try to hide, "was meant to honor those men. That name, it's not just a bank account. It is a promise. And I am here because I found out that promise was being broken. I am here because I have seen receipts for $80,000 golf trips, charged to the same fund that was too broke to fix a man's wheelchair ramp." The room was electric. The veterans in the back were leaning forward. "And the general's family," I continued. "They didn't want me to find out. My mother, Diane Langley, she spent 30 years running, hiding me, because this family, the Reddick family, didn't want a granddaughter. They wanted an asset, a biological to be controlled. They knew I existed, and they did everything in their power to make sure I would never, ever see this. I had not meant to." I looked at Trent. He was shaking his head, a look of pure, unadulterated disgust on his face, as if my poverty and my story were an offensive smell. But he did not look surprised, and he did not look like he was about to deny it. "This is what I am fighting for," I said. "Not the money, the honor." I finished my testimony. The silence in the room was absolute. Elliot let the moment hang. Then, he turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the defense now wishes to present the evidence from the general's private safe. We have the DNA report. We have the letters from Lena Cole. We have the general's handwritten notes." Price was on his feet so fast he knocked over his water glass. "Objection, objection. Forgery, tainted evidence. We have no idea where these documents came from. That safe has been accessible for days. How do we know Miss Chavez didn't plant them herself? How do we know he pointed at Elliot, "didn't fabricate them? This is a desperate, theatrical attempt to legitimize a fraudulent claim." The judge looked at the binders. She looked at Price. She looked at Elliot. She looked conflicted. Price had a point. It was a chain of custody nightmare. The room, which had been on my side a moment before, was now buzzing. Had I planted it? The doubt was there. The tide was turning against us. "This is a serious accusation. Mr. Price," the judge said, "it is a serious fraud. Your Honor, I demand these documents be thrown out." The room was in chaos. Price was shouting. Elliot was standing, waiting. "Your Honor," Elliot said, his voice cutting through the noise like a scalpel. The room fell silent. "Mr. Price is correct," Elliot said. I stared at him. What was he doing? "He is correct that these documents could be faked. A good forger can fake handwriting. A good lawyer can fake a story. The paper can be aged. The ink can be matched. Price was smiling, a thin, wolfish grin. So, Elliot said, it's a good thing I am not resting my case on them. I am resting my case on this. He pulled the black USB drive from his pocket. Your Honor, the defense would like to play an audio file. It is a recording of a conversation between the plaintiff, Mr. Trent Reddick, and the deceased, Major General Mason Reddick, which took place in March of this year, 2 weeks before the General's final will was signed and notarized. Price's face, I will never, as long as I live, forget the look on his face. The blood did not just drain from it. It was sucked from it. He went the color of ash. He turned, his movements jerky, and looked at his client. Trent Reddick was no longer smirking. He looked like he was going to be sick. Objection, Price stammered. Illegal recording, wiretapping, inadmissible. It's not, actually, Elliot said, his voice pleasant. It was recorded by a third party, legally, on property owned by the General, who, as the recording will show, was aware of and consented to the recording. It is perfectly admissible, and it speaks directly to the plaintiff's motives and the General's state of mind. The judge looked at Price. I am intrigued. Overruled. You may play the file. Mr. Kane. Elliot plugged the drive into the court's audio system. He hit play. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the air conditioner kick on. First, the General's voice, weak, but sharp as a razor. I will not have it. Trent. I will die in shame if I know the Reddick Honor Fund is being used to buy you new golf clubs. And then, Trent's voice, cold, arrogant, and clear as a bell. Be careful. Uncle, if you do this, if you try to make this grand gesture because of your family's lost kid, you are going to drag us all down. She's nothing. She is a playing card. Do you understand me? A ghost. You try to play her, and you will burn this entire family to the ground. She doesn't matter. Elliot hit stop. The silence that followed was not silence. It was a vacuum. It felt as if all the air, all the sound, all the life had been sucked out of the room. The press was staring, mouths open. The veterans were on their feet. A low growl starting in the back. The Reddick family, they were staring at Trent, their faces a mask of horror. He had not just implicated himself, he had implicated them. He had admitted they all knew about the lost kid. Trent had his head in his hands. Price was pale, staring at his legal pad as if it held the secrets of the universe. The judge took off her glasses. She rubbed the bridge of her nose. She looked at Trent. She looked at me. She looked at Elliot. This court, she said, her voice shaking with what sounded like suppressed rage, is adjourned for the day. She banged the gavel, the sound echoing like a rifle shot. I am ordering this audio file and all the documents from the safe to be taken into the court's custody for immediate, independent forensic verification. We will reconvene tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for a ruling. This hearing is over. Bailiff, clear the room. It was a madhouse. The press surged forward, shouting Trent's name. He was hustled out a side door by his lawyer. The veterans were cheering. Elliot put his hand on my back again. Walk, he said. Do not run. Walk. We moved through the chaos, a small island of calm in a sea of pandemonium. We were almost to the door when I saw her. Mara. The quiet cousin. She was standing against the back wall, by herself, tears streaming down her face. But she was not crying. She was smiling. The cameras and the shouting reporters felt a lifetime away. I was in my apartment, but I was not celebrating. The adrenaline from the courtroom had drained away, leaving a familiar, hollow exhaustion. I was sitting on the floor of my small living room, the blinds drawn, surrounded by the ghosts of my new life. Mara's binder of fraudulent emails was open on my coffee table. Gloria's handwritten ledger was next to it. My laptop was on, the screen glowing with the fake $80,000 invoice for Trent's golf retreat. This was the ammunition that had won the day. This was the truth that had silenced the room. But it didn't feel like a victory. My mind kept wandering, pulling away from the spreadsheets and the lies, and drifting back to a quiet, antiseptic room at the VA. It kept settling on the general, on Mason Reddick. I remembered him, his body frail under the thin hospital blanket, his eyes still sharp, his hand papery and cool when I'd checked his pulse. I'd been so focused on the fight, on the anger, on the injustice of the fund. I had used his memory as a weapon, just as he had intended. But now, in the silence, a different question surfaced, a more painful one. If he were alive, would he have wanted this? Would he have wanted his family's name? The name he had carried through wars, the name he had stamped onto his charity, dragged through the public mud. Would he have wanted to see his nephew, his own blood, exposed and humiliated on the evening news? Or had he wanted something simpler? Had he just wanted to find his granddaughter? Had he wanted to sit in a quiet room, not a courtroom, and just know me I had taken his private, desperate search and his final, strategic act of anger, and I had turned them into a public spectacle? I had brought the war he had started in private to the front page of the Ridgeport Gazette. I had done it to protect his legacy, or so I told myself. But looking at the chaos, at the ruin I had helped create, I wasn't sure. I was not sure where his will ended and my own need for a reckoning began. My phone buzzed on the table, a sharp, jarring sound in the quiet. I flinched. Another threat, another reporter. It was a text from an unknown number. A corporate-looking email signature was at the bottom. Ridgeport Veterans Medical Center. Administration. Ms. Chavez, in light of the ongoing legal proceedings, the Internal Review Board has voted to pause its investigation into the complaint filed against you. Your employment status remains on administrative leave, pending the final judgment of the court. I read it twice. My job, my life, the one I had built, the one that was mine. It was still hanging by a single, fraying thread. If Judge Vance ruled against me tomorrow, if she decided the will was invalid, I was not just a failed heir, I was a disgraced medic. The hospital would cut me loose to appease the Reddick family. I would have nothing. The phone rang, and this time I nearly dropped it. A local number I did not recognize. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text came through. Natalia, it's Henderson, from the VA. Pick up the damn phone. Sergeant? Mr. Henderson? The man in the wheelchair. I dialed him back instantly. Mr. Henderson, are you okay? I'm so sorry. Easy, Sergeant. His voice, gravelly and warm, came through the speaker. Don't you apologize. I'm the one calling you. Just wanted to tell you. We saw you on the news. Oh, I said, my voice small. I'm sorry you had to see that. Sorry? He barked a laugh. That was the best damn thing I've seen on TV since the 1991 Super Bowl. You should have seen the look on that stuffed shirt's face when they played that tape. We all stood up and cheered. Well, I wheeled back and forth. You know. I felt a stupid, hot tear roll down my cheek. Listen, girl, he said, his voice softening. I'm calling for a reason. That courtroom was a mess, but we saw you. You were in there, fighting for us, fighting for the fund. We all knew what the Reddicks were. We've known for years. We never had a soldier on the inside. I'm not a soldier anymore, Mr. Henderson, I whispered. You're one of us, he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. And we don't leave our own on the field. I'm just calling to tell you. We'll be back tomorrow. The whole crew. We'll be in the back row. We won't say a word. We won't bring any signs. We'll just be there. So when that judge looks at you, she doesn't just see one person. She sees the entire damn battalion you're fighting for. You got it. Yes, sir, I said, the words automatic. My throat too tight to say anything else. Good. Now get some sleep. Sergeant, you look like hell on the news. Get some rest. The battle's almost over. He hung up. I sat in the silence, but it was a different kind of silence. It was not empty. It was full. It was the we he had spoken of. A knock on my door made me jump. A sharp, precise, 3-rap tattoo. I went to the door. My heart pounding again. I looked through the peephole. Elliot Kane. He was standing in my hallway at 10 o'clock at night. He was not wearing his suit jacket. His tie was gone. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were bright, electric. He was holding a large, thick 9x12 envelope. It was not a modern envelope. It was heavy, cream-colored cardstock, sealed on the back with a hard red wax seal. I fumbled with the locks and opened the door. Elliot. What is it? What happened? I apologize for the hour, he said. His words clipped. But I found something. After the hearing, I went back to the office, not to celebrate, to dig. I had this feeling that Price's objection to the safe was too convenient, that he was right, that we were missing something. So I went to the firm's private archive, the sub-basement, the dead storage, the physical files from before 1990. He stepped inside, and I closed the door. He held up the envelope. This was in the general's personal vault, the one at the firm, not the house. It's been there for 25 years. It was logged in 1999, with a single standing order. He read the notation, written in Sharpie on the back of the envelope's protective sleeve. To be opened by my executor, Elliot Kane, and only in the event my testamentary competency is legally challenged, or if things, quote, go to hell in a handbasket, unquote, I believe, Elliot said, placing the envelope on my coffee table, that today qualifies. We stared at it. The red wax seal was stamped with the Reddick family crest, an eagle, clutching a banner. What is it? I whispered. It's his last shot, Elliot said. The one he saved, in case the enemy overran his position. He pulled a small pocket knife from his trousers, the kind a gentleman might use to clean his nails. He sliced the seal, the wax cracking and falling away. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a letter, multiple pages, on the general's thick personal stationery, covered in his spiky, furious, precise handwriting. It was not addressed to me. It was not addressed to Elliot. It was addressed to the honorable judge presiding over my legacy. My God, Elliot whispered, his lawyer's poise gone, replaced by simple awe. He began to read aloud. Your Honor, if you are reading this letter, it means my family has done the one thing I prayed they would not. They have contested my will. They have chosen greed over honor. And they have, I am sure, tried to paint my chosen heir as a predator and me as a fool. I am writing this letter, which I will seal and place with my attorney, to be my final witness, to speak for me when I cannot. Elliot's voice was thick. He continued, I will be clear. My mind is my own. The changes to my will are not the product of morphine or senility. They are the product of a 30-year search and a 6-month confirmation. I discovered my granddaughter, Hannah Cole, known as Natalia Chavez, working as a medic in the very hospital my name is on. The irony is not lost on me. I did not tell her. I did not want to influence her. I wanted to watch her. And what I saw was a soldier, a professional, someone who, unlike my nephew, understood that honor is a verb. I saw her treat the broken and the forgotten with a dignity my own family has lost. I discovered, in that same 6 months, the full criminal extent of my nephew's theft. He was, and is, systematically robbing the Reddick Honor Fund, a charity I built to serve my brothers and sisters in arms. My attempts to confront him were met with leverage. He used my private, agonizing search for my lost granddaughter as a shield, a piece of blackmail. He knew I would not risk a public scandal while I was still searching for her. He was right, so I waited. I am changing my will for 2 reasons. First, to give my granddaughter what is rightfully hers by blood, and second, to give her the power and the responsibility to clean my house, to fix what my family has broken. My family will call this an act of a madman. I call it the final, and most important, strategic command of my life. Elliot had to stop. He cleared his throat. I was just numb. But there was a second document, thinner, Clipped to the back of the letter, it was a formal, notarized page, a codicil, a secret, final addendum to the will. Elliot read it, his eyes scanning, and then he looked at me, his face pale. "Natalia," he said, "this is the masterstroke." "What?" "It's a conditional bequest," he said, his voice shaking with a lawyer's appreciation for a perfect, brutal maneuver. "The bulk of the estate, the houses, the investments, all of it is not given to you. It is placed in a conditional trust, of which you are the sole trustee." "What does that mean?" "In English." "It means," Elliot said, "you only get the money if, and I quote, she agrees to take control of and actively manage the Reddick Honor Fund to serve the veteran and first responder community of Colorado for a period of no less than 25 years. If you refuse, or if you fail, the entire estate is liquidated and given to the Nature Conservancy." I stared at him. "He gave me a job." "He didn't make you a millionaire, Natalia," Elliot said, a slow, astonished smile dawning on his face. "He made you responsible. He didn't want you to be a girl who won the lottery. He wanted you to be the general. He has tied his entire legacy, every dollar, every building, to you, and to the one thing you care about, the fund. This is the single most beautiful and most ruthless piece of estate law I have ever seen. He didn't just disinherit them. He's forcing his name, through you, to become the one thing they hate accountable." I took the pages from his hand, at the bottom of the last page, under the notary stamp. The general had added one last line, a postscript. It was not for the judge. P.S. Hannah. My breath caught. If you are reading this, it means they have put you in the one position I never could protect your mother from. I am asking you, as my granddaughter and as a soldier, do not run. Your mother ran. I am asking you to fight. Make it mean something. That was it. That was the crack. The dam I had built inside me. The professional wall. The soldier's armor. All of it just broke. I sank onto the floor, the letters in my hand, and I wept. I did not cry like a medic. I did not cry like a witness. I cried like a 10-year-old girl who had just found out she had a grandfather. I cried for Lena. I cried for Diane. And I cried for the old, stubborn, brilliant, manipulative man who had, in the end, seen me. He had seen me, and he had trusted me. He had not just given me a name. He had given me a purpose. The sun came up. I had not slept. Elliot had left hours ago, taking the letter, his face set with a new, hard determination. I stood in the shower, letting the hot water wash away the exhaustion. But it could not wash away the new, heavy weight, the weight of responsibility. I got dressed. I put on a simple black suit Elliot had bought for me. I felt like an imposter in it. I reached into my drawer and pulled out the small, silver wing pendant. H.C. I fastened it around my neck. It was cold against my skin. On the walk to the courthouse, I did not take a cab. I walked. The air was crisp, the city moving around me, unaware of the battle that was about to conclude. I was passing a brick wall, a long alley I always used as a shortcut. When I saw it, someone, overnight, had painted a single, massive piece of graffiti, in stark, white letters, 6 feet high. It said, "Make it mean something." I stopped. I stared at it. It was a sign, a period at the end of the general's sentence. When I got to the courthouse, the crowd was even bigger. The press surged, but I did not see them. I saw Elliot, waiting for me on the top step. He was holding the large, wax-sealed envelope. "Are you ready, Sergeant?" he asked. "I am," I said. We did not go into the courtroom. We went to the bailiff and to the judge's private chambers. Elliot held out the envelope. "Please give this to Judge Vance," he said, his voice formal. "It is from the general. We request she read it, in her chambers, before she renders her judgment." The bailiff, his face impassive, took the envelope. He locked the door. Through the frosted glass, I could see the silhouette of the judge, sitting alone at her desk, I saw her take the envelope, I saw her break the seal, and I saw her, alone in the light of her desk lamp, begin to read. The courtroom on the day of the verdict felt less like a legal chamber and more like a pressure cooker waiting to explode. The room was packed tighter than it had been on the first day. The press had smelled blood, and they were crammed into the gallery. Cameras ready, pens hovering. The Reddick family sat in their reserved rows, but their posture had changed. Gone was the arrogant sprawl of the first morning. They sat stiffly, shoulders touching, a wall of expensive wool and silent anxiety. They were hoping for a miracle. They were hoping that money, influence, and the sheer weight of their name would somehow tilt the scales back in their favor. I walked in with Elliot Kane. I was not wearing a uniform. I was not wearing a disguise. I wore a simple black dress and the silver pendant with the initials H.C. resting against my throat. I did not look at the floor. I did not look at the cameras. I looked straight ahead at the empty judge's bench. I was calm. It was the strange, hollow calm that comes after a long shelling stops. The truth was out. The general's voice had been heard. Whatever happened now was out of my hands. "All rise," the bailiff shouted. Judge Eleanor Vance swept into the room. She did not look tired. She looked formidable. She carried a sheaf of papers in one hand and the general's wax-sealed envelope in the other. She sat down, arranged her robes, and looked out over the courtroom. Her gaze lingered on Trent Reddick for a long, uncomfortable moment before shifting to me. "This court has reviewed the evidence presented," she began, her voice clear and amplified. "We have received the independent forensic analysis of the audio recording, the handwritten letters found in the wall safe, and the sealed documents provided by Mr. Kane from the firm's archives." She paused. The silence was absolute. "The forensic report is conclusive. The audio recording is authentic. There is no evidence of tampering. The handwriting matches known samples of Major General Mason Reddick, Lena Reddick Cole, and Diane Langley. These documents are genuine." A collective exhale went through the room. I heard Trent let out a small, sharp breath. "Furthermore," the judge continued, holding up the general's letter, "this court has read the personal correspondence of the deceased. It serves as a clear, lucid, and powerful testament to his state of mind." She put on her glasses and looked down at the paper. "I wish to read one sentence into the record," she said. "The general writes, 'If my family drags this girl to court, if they try to destroy her to save their own bank accounts, then that is the final proof that they have forgotten completely the meaning of the name they are carrying.'" She took off her glasses and looked directly at the Reddick family. "It appears," she said, her voice dry, "that the general was a prophet." The cousins looked down. Trent stared straight ahead, his face a mask of pale fury. "Therefore," Judge Vance said, bringing the gavel down with a soft, decisive tap, "it is the ruling of this court that the last will and testament of Major General Mason Reddick, including the contested addendum, is valid. The claim of undue influence is dismissed with prejudice. The claim of incapacity is dismissed with prejudice." She looked at me. "Miss Chavez, or Miss Cole, as you may choose to be known, you are the sole legal heir to the Reddick estate and the appointed trustee of the Reddick Honor Fund." I closed my eyes. I felt Elliot's hand squeeze my arm. We had won. The money, the house, the fund. It was over. "However," the judge said. My eyes snapped open. The room froze. "There is the matter of the secondary codicil," she said. "The document found in the sealed envelope provided by Mr. Kane." She picked up the thin, notarized page I had seen Elliot read the night before. The Reddick family perked up. Hope flared in Trent's eyes. Was there a loophole? Was there money for them after all? "The general was not a cruel man," Judge Vance said, "and he believed in family. In this final addendum, he acknowledges that his nephews, nieces, and cousins have become accustomed to a certain lifestyle. He did not wish to leave them destitute." Trent straightened his tie. A smug, relieved look began to creep back onto his face. He thought he had won a consolation prize. He thought the old man had blinked. Therefore, the judge read, General Reddick has established individual trust funds for each of his living relatives. These trusts contain significant sums, enough to ensure a comfortable life. You could practically hear the champagne corks popping in the family section. They were smiling. They were safe. But, the judge said, her voice sharpening like a blade, the general has placed a condition on the release of these funds, a condition that must be met before a single penny is disbursed. She looked at Trent. The funds will only be released, she read, upon the successful completion of 1,000 hours of community service. The smiles vanished. Specifically, she continued, service to be performed at the Reddick estate or at any veteran outreach center designated by the trustee, Natalia Chavez. This service must be direct. It must involve the care, feeding, or support of veterans. It must be completed within 5 years. And it must be signed off on, hour by hour, by Miss Chavez herself. The courtroom erupted. What? Trent was on his feet, his face turning a violent shade of purple. That is insane. That is slavery. I am a CEO. I don't scrub floors. Sit down, Mr. Reddick, the judge barked. It is an insult, Trent shouted, pointing at me. He is trying to humiliate us. I will not do it. I will not take orders from her. Then you will not get the money, the judge said, her voice icy calm. It is a simple choice, Mr. Reddick. The general has the right to dispose of his assets as he sees fit. He evidently felt that his family needed to learn the value of service. The court is simply protecting his will. Trent stood there, his mouth opening and closing, realizing the trap that had snapped shut. He wasn't just disinherited, he was being offered a lifeline that required him to kneel. It was perfect. It was brutal. There is one final matter, Judge Vance said, turning a page. Based on the financial documents submitted into evidence by the defense and confirmed by the testimony regarding the Reddick Honor Fund, this court is referring the entire financial history of the fund to the State Attorney General and the Charity Oversight Commission. Trent dropped into his chair as if his strings had been cut. They will investigate the allegations of embezzlement, fraud, and misappropriation of charitable assets, she said. Mr. Reddick, I suggest you save whatever money you have. You are going to need a criminal defense attorney. She gathered her papers. Miss Chavez, she said, do you have anything you wish to say? I stood up. I walked to the microphone. The cameras flashed, but they didn't blind me anymore. I looked at the Reddick family. They looked small. They looked terrified. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I felt no joy in their ruin, only a deep, settling sense of balance. I didn't come here to take anything from you, I said, my voice steady. I came here because a promise was made to the men and women who served this country. A promise that was broken. I'm going to fix it. And if you want to help, if you want to earn the name you carry, then I will see you at work. I turned to the judge. Thank you, Your Honor. Case closed, Judge Vance said, and the gavel fell one last time. The noise was deafening. Reporters were shouting, but the sound that mattered most was the roar from the back of the room. The veterans. Mr. Henderson was cheering, waving his hat. Maria was crying. They surged forward, ignoring the bailiffs, surrounding me in a wall of hugs and handshakes. You did it, Sergeant, Henderson yelled, gripping my hand. You brought the general home. I looked over their shoulders. The Reddick family was scattering like cockroaches when the lights turn on. They were arguing with their lawyers, arguing with each other. Trent was sitting alone at the table, his head in his hands, totally isolated. He had a choice now, serve or starve. It was the harshest lesson he had ever been taught, and he had to learn it from the grave. 3 months later, the snow had melted from the mountains above Ridgeport. I pulled my truck up the long, winding driveway of the Reddick estate, but it didn't look like a mausoleum anymore. The massive iron gates were open, a new sign, hand-carved from oak, hung by the entrance. The Reddick Recovery Center, There were cars everywhere, not limousines, but beat-up sedans, vans from the VFW, and trucks with veteran-owned bumper stickers. I walked up the steps. The front door was wide open. Inside, the silence was gone. The massive ballroom, once used for parties where people like Trent drank champagne and ignored the world, was now filled with rows of folding chairs. A group therapy session was starting. I heard laughter. I heard the murmur of shared stories. The library, where the general had sat alone with his maps, was now a counseling center. We had hired 3 full-time social workers. The kitchen, Gloria's domain, was churning out hundreds of meals a day for the homeless veteran outreach program. Gloria was still there, running the staff with the precision of a drill sergeant. But she smiled now. She smiled all the time. I walked through the halls, checking in. I stopped by the reception desk to look at the volunteer roster. We had dozens of people signing up. Local kids, retired teachers, other vets, and there, at the bottom of the list, was a name that made me pause. Trent Reddick. I walked out to the back courtyard. Near the garages, I saw him. He was wearing a neon orange vest. He was holding a trash picker and a black plastic bag. He looked thinner. His face wasn't flushed with expensive wine anymore. It was sunburned. He wasn't shouting. He was picking up cigarette butts and debris from the edge of the parking lot. He saw me. He stopped. For a second, I thought he would sneer. I thought he would throw the bag down and storm off. But he didn't. He just looked at me. There was no arrogance left in his eyes, just exhaustion, and something else, a grudging, painful recognition. He nodded. Once, a short, sharp jerk of his chin. Then he looked down and went back to work. I checked my watch. He had 940 hours to go. I didn't feel sorry for him. He was doing the work. He was seeing, for the first time in his life, the people he had stolen from. He was seeing their prosthetic limbs, their scars, their struggles. Maybe it would change him. Maybe it wouldn't. But he was serving, and that was the victory. I walked back inside, to the small office I had made for myself on the first floor. It wasn't the general's study. I left that room as it was, a museum to his search. My office was simple, a desk, a computer, and a view of the mountains. On the wall, I had hung 3 pictures. One was the formal portrait of Major General Mason Reddick, looking stern and heroic. One was a grainy photo of my mother, Diane, looking fierce and protective, holding me as a baby. And the third was the photo from the album, Lena, my biological mother, laughing in the sun, before the world broke her. I sat down at my desk. I touched the H.C. pendant at my throat. I had 2 names. I had 2 families. I belonged to the world of the powerful and the world of the invisible. And for the first time, those 2 worlds weren't at war. They were working together. I looked out the window at the veterans gathering on the lawn, at the life filling this cold stone house. The general was right. His legacy wasn't the money. It wasn't the medals. His legacy was this. It was forcing a family that had lost its way to find it again in the mud and the work. It was forcing me to stop running and stand up. It was forcing the truth to matter more than the comfort of a lie. This wasn't just revenge. Revenge is burning a house down. This was justice. Justice is building something new out of the ashes. I opened my laptop. I had a budget meeting in 10 minutes. I had a center to run. Make it mean something, I whispered to the empty room, and I got to work. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on Natalia's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help these stories reach even more people.